"Get out of my store." Ethan Parker's voice ricocheted off glass and marble, a crack of thunder inside the Novatech flagship that sent chatter skittering into silence. His chest heaved with each word. One manicured finger jabbed toward the doors like a judge's gavel. The chandelier above the premium laptop bar threw prismatic light across his tailored suit, but his face, pinched, red, vibrating with certainty, was the brightest thing in the room. The woman he'd just struck stood very still. A hoodie. Faded jeans. Laces double-knotted on worn sneakers. Her hand came down from her cheek the way a surgeon sets down a scalpel. Calm, precise, final. When she spoke, it was almost a whisper, but it braided into the silence and pulled every head toward her. "Your store." 2 syllables, soft as silk, sharp as glass. Somewhere near the smart home aisle, a toddler stopped mid-cry. At the headphone wall, a teenage boy forgot his spec sheet. The security guard by the entrance shifted his weight, as if remembering a drill that had never covered this. Phones rose like a meadow of dark flowers, camera lenses opening to drink in this moment. A palm-shaped bloom of red had already begun to flare on her cheek. Leo Martinez, 22, lanky, name badge slightly crooked from a hurried shift change, took 2 steps and stopped. Natalie Brooks, the assistant manager, had a hand on his sleeve. She didn't look at him. She stared at Ethan with a horror that couldn't find its way to speech. Leo's jaw worked once, twice. He swallowed it all, anger, shame, reflex, and steadied himself. Ethan adjusted his cufflink with a little flourish, the gesture of a man past the point of no return pretending he hadn't reached it. "I don't care who you think you are," he announced, louder now because louder had always rescued him. "We don't tolerate people like," he caught himself on the edge of the old words, "the ones you only say in rooms where nobody is recording, like this." The sentence fell flat. The cameras caught the part he didn't say. 5 minutes earlier, there had been music. That expensive kind of music you don't notice until someone asks you to hum it. Sales associates in charcoal aprons spoke the dialect of specs and monthly plans. The premium phone wall curved like a skyline, matte glass, surgical light, price tags that used commas instead of decimals. Novatech had been built to sell the future one box at a time. It was very good at it. She had slipped in without ceremony. Hood up. Hands in the pocket to stop them from touching the displays she'd helped design. Slow steps to feel the room breathe. She paused just inside the threshold and, only for a heartbeat, let herself feel proud. The aisles were spaced the way she'd argued for against some consultant's heat map. The concierge tables were low enough that someone in a wheelchair didn't have to surrender dignity to ask a question. The lighting was kind to human skin, not just to anodized aluminum. Then she saw the small things. An elderly woman braced on a walker at the budget phones. Leo was showing her how a simple UI could make texting a grandson feel less like decoding an alien language. He was patient. He slowed his own voice without making hers feel slow. He was doing the work. Ethan arrived like a gust and scattered it. "We don't have time for tire kickers," he said, his smile a blade turned sideways. The woman's face folded into itself, the way paper does when a crease becomes a scar. She murmured an apology for existing, then pivoted the walker toward the door. Leo's mouth opened. Natalie's eyes begged him not to. He closed it. The woman in the hoodie, no one was writing down her name yet, watched Ethan walk away, shoulders loose with victory, and felt a familiar heat rise that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with memory. The first time Ava Johnson had been told she didn't belong had been in a library basement that smelled like paste and old carpet. Foster home number 4. She'd wanted to use the good computer, the one with a flat monitor, the one fast enough to let you dream in straight lines, and a volunteer had planted himself between her and the mouse. "Homework only," he'd said, as if the answer to what she was doing could only ever be no. She'd pointed to a dog-eared business book she'd checked out from the discard shelf. He'd shrugged toward a machine with a yellowed CRT and a keyboard that stuck on S. She'd learned then that people carried measuring tapes behind their eyes. She learned where to put the scissors. Back in the store, she drifted to the flagship phones. The placard above the center shelf read, "Meet the new standard." She smiled. Standards were living things. They die when you stop feeding them. A concierge station sat empty. 2 associates, one new, one practiced, were inside a gleaming terrarium of a TV display with a man whose watch face looked like a small moon. Ethan hovered at a respectful distance from the watch, close enough to claim the sale, far enough to suggest this level of purchase had its own weather system. She waited. "Can I help you?" Leo had circled back. The circles under his eyes had a copper-colored tint that said morning started before sun. He kept his voice at her volume, which was the first dignity most people needed and too few got. Anything in particular? Switching ecosystems, or staying put? Just trying to see what's actually different, she said. This year versus last. Leo lowered his voice like a man sharing state secrets. Marketing will say the camera. It's the battery and the trade in math. If you don't game and you're not pushing video, the pro is just heavier bragging rights. He smiled, quick and real. My manager might tell you different. Her lips twitched. I bet he would. Leo. Ethan's shadow arrived before his body. He didn't look at her. He looked through her. Premium appointment on 3. Now. I'm with, I'll take it from here. Ethan's smile for her was all exit sign. We have a great budget line for streaming and basic email. If you're just browsing, the pawn shop down on Maple will be more your range. The sentence pinged off the glass and came back uglier. Somewhere behind her, a businesswoman in cream stopped mid-step. On the sofa row, an older man in a camel coat set down the soundbar brochure as if it had started to stink. Ava breathed in for 4, held for 2, exhaled for 6. It was the graph that had steadied a company through 3 recessions and a pandemic. It worked for conversations, too. Thanks, she said. I'll look around. He left without hearing that thanks was a bell. At the premium laptop bar, the crown jewels, each glowing on its own square of pale oak, she let her fingers graze a trackpad without leaving oil. The starting price on the placard had 2 commas. The model code names were poetic nonsense. The sales were good here when the staff remembered they weren't selling absolution. Ethan slid in, confident as a salesman stepping into a mirror. Those start at $3,000, he said. Public libraries got free internet. She lifted her eyes to his, the way a quiet person lifts a lid. I asked about the flagship phone. And I'm answering the question you should be asking. He tapped the oak with a knuckle. Value. Value, she repeated. She reached into the kangaroo pocket of the hoodie, pulled out a rectangle of matte black, and held it between 2 fingers. The room inhaled. The American Express Centurion didn't shine. It absorbed light and reflected back aroma. Ethan's smile didn't falter so much as harden. Something old and hungry woke behind his eyes. He plucked the card in a motion too fast for customer service and held it like evidence. This better not be stolen, he said. 3 forms of ID. And I'll be calling the bank. A small sound came out of Natalie, half cough, half warning. Leo's ears went red. A pair of teenagers by the gaming rigs shared a look that meant, are you seeing this? An older woman near smart vacuums angled her phone as if filming a sunrise. The music, which had been politely neutral, sounded now like a soundtrack somebody should have turned off 2 minutes ago. You don't ask everyone for that, Ava said, as mild as tea. She took the card back from his pinched fingers without touching his skin. We have policies, he said. So do I, she said. She stepped back, drew her own phone, and made a call whose number she knew the way a pianist knows home keys. Caleb, she said. Downtown staff files. All of them. And I need you here. Ethan chuckled, loud enough for the aisle to hear. Calling your crew? Cute. Try anything and I'll have you out of here in cuffs. She looked at him the way a lighthouse looks at fog. Leo tried again. Courage made his voice deeper than usual. Sir, this isn't, don't waste time on window shoppers, Ethan snapped, making sure the sentence carried to anyone who needed the lesson. He pitched it toward Leo, but it landed on the woman in the hoodie. The store felt like a lung that had exhaled and forgotten how to inhale. Even the chandelier light seemed to sharpen. Ava kept her gaze on Ethan. I'd like to speak with the owner, she said. Her tone made the sentence sound like an offer to step away from a cliff. Ethan laughed, the brittle bark of a man whose mask is cracking and thinks volume is glue. The owner. He took her in again, head to toe, as if cotton and denim were an answer. Lady, the owner doesn't associate with people like you. I run this place. And I'm telling you, you don't belong here. Sir, she said, and it was almost kind. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Those 8 words are a rope thrown down a well. He could have taken it. He cut it instead. The misunderstanding is you thinking your hoodie-wearing, bargain-hunting self gets to demand anything in my store. The crowd's murmur shifted to something else, a low, electric warning. Natalie's lips parted around a please she didn't dare finish. The security guard rolled his shoulders like a man wishing he'd trained for a different kind of fight. Leo stepped between them, leaving an arm's length to both. "She's trying to shop," he said. "That's all." "You're fired," Ethan said, not bothering to change expressions. He enjoyed the cleanness of the word in the air. "Clock out. Get out." "Then I'll clock out," Leo said, voice steady now. "But I'm not leaving her alone with you." Ethan's face did a small, ugly thing. The leash he called professionalism slipped. He stepped into Ava's space. His shadow fell across her shoes. It's true that moments lengthen when they matter. The human brain sprints and narrates and begs, and time puts out both hands like a traffic cop. In that slow, precise interval, three things could have happened. Natalie could have taken Ethan's sleeve. The guard could have closed the gap. Ethan could have remembered that people were watching. Crack. It sounded like a plate shattering in a kitchen you love. Ava's head snapped half a degree. She took one involuntary step back and caught the edge of the oak display with her palm, not to steady, to anchor. Heat bloomed across her cheek. She touched it with 2 fingers and brought them down clean. No blood. Just the record. Phones rose higher. Some hands shook. Some didn't. Someone said, "Oh my God." Someone said, "Call someone." Someone said nothing and kept filming the way a person kneels and prays without words. Ethan inhaled in ragged pieces, then squared his shoulders as if the camera lenses were currency he could still spend. "You see that?" he said, almost triumphantly. "You see what we have to deal with." Ava adjusted her hood with the quiet economy of someone replacing a crown. She lifted her phone again. "Caleb," she said, and if her voice trembled, no one heard it. "Yes. I'm ready now." The doors sighed open. Caleb Grant came first, broad-shouldered in corporate black, the kind of security that takes notes as well as punches. 2 executives ghosted behind him, navy and charcoal, shoes soft, eyes hard. The room's center of gravity moved without asking permission. Ethan smoothed his tie, tried on 3 smiles, kept the one he used for wealthy men. "We had a situation," he announced, stepping forward as if to accept a medal. "It's under control." The woman in navy didn't even blink at him. Her gaze found the red tide on Ava's cheek with a precise, human wince. When she spoke, she pitched it to the room so the words could do the work they needed to do. "Ms. Johnson," she said. "We came as soon as you called." The word MS landed like a gavel. The last name landed like a building permit. Ethan's mouth opened. Closed. Opened. "Ms. Johnson," he managed. He gestured at cotton. At denim. At a world that had just betrayed his eyesight. "But she's..." Ava turned to him. Nothing triumphant. Something like grief. "I'm Ava Johnson," she said, and the room rearranged its furniture around the sentence. "I built this company. I own this store. And you just assaulted me." Silence. Then the small, collective exhale of a truth finally said out loud. Ethan's color fell out of his face like sand from a cut bag. I didn't know," he stammered. "You were dressed like, I thought, you thought clothes determine respect," Ava said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You thought you could sort people in a glance. You thought your guess was a policy." She looked to Caleb. "Please remove him." Caleb stepped. Ethan tried a sidestep around accountability. "She looked like she didn't belong here," he blurted, the last defense of a man made of misread signs. Caleb's hand, light on the elbow, redirected him toward the doors. They opened, closed, and Ethan's reflection slid off the glass like a stain washed away. The room inhaled for the first time in 10 minutes. Ava let the quiet sit. Then she turned to the only person who'd moved toward decency when it cost him. "What's your last name?" she asked. Leo blinked. "Martinez." "You stood up," she said. "You did your job when your job description didn't cover it." She nodded once. "Decision made. You're not fired. Your assistant manager, effective today. HR will handle the paperwork." Leo's throat bobbed. He managed, "Yes, and then, because the right words matter, thank you." Natalie's breath had been coming in little stutters. She found a full one and stepped forward. "Ms. Johnson," she said, and something inside the honorific trembled. I knew he was wrong. I stayed quiet. I have a daughter. That's not a reason. It's just the truth. She swallowed. I want to be useful. Not just present. You'll keep your job, Ava said. And you'll help build our bias training. Not sit in it. Build it. If you see this again and do nothing, we're done. Do you understand the difference? Yes, Natalie said, and the word landed like a pledge. A circle of customers remained, those who wanted to see whether repair looked like anything more than a receipt. A businesswoman in cream, Lydia Wong, as the internet would learn later, lifted her phone, not as a threat but as a pen. Ms. Johnson, she said, businesslike even in astonishment, I walked out earlier. I couldn't buy from a place that treated people like that. I'd like to post what I saw you do. All of it. Including the failure. Tell the truth, Ava said. All of it, or it's just marketing. Lydia nodded. Somewhere, a caption began writing itself. What I saw at Novatech today. Ava faced the store. The red on her cheek had darkened to the color of instruction. She didn't climb a counter. She didn't need a microphone. People leaned forward because dignity has good acoustics. I dress like this sometimes, she said, to see how our values survive when nobody thinks anyone important is watching. Today, they didn't. That ends now. New policy, effective immediately. Dignity is not a tiered plan. No profiling. No special script for watches and a different one for hoodies. If serving everyone with respect slows us down, good. We'll be slower and better. She looked at the chandelier, at the light she'd chosen years ago because it made human skin look like the miracle it was. She looked back at Leo and Natalie. We'll apologize with our mouths and with our systems, she said. Both. Or it doesn't count. She didn't say more. She didn't need to. The room had already started to change shape. Caleb murmured something into a sleeve mic. A medic appeared, offering an ice pack she accepted and held to her cheek like a seal on a letter she was about to send. Customers drifted not out, but inward, asking questions, finishing purchases, leaving with more than hardware. Outside, the afternoon light leaned against the glass. Inside, a store learned how to breathe again. The slap was still ringing in the minds of everyone who had seen it, even though Ethan Parker had already been escorted out. The mark on Ava Johnson's cheek was not just a bruise, it was a symbol. A scarlet reminder of how arrogance and prejudice could destroy a man's career in seconds, and how justice sometimes came disguised in hoodies and sneakers. Phones were still raised. Customers whispered, some trembling, some furious, but none indifferent. The silence that had been born from shock had turned into a tense hum, like a fuse burning toward an explosion. Natalie Brooks stood frozen at the service desk. She had worked under Ethan for nearly 3 years, swallowing her discomfort day after day, choosing her daughter's rent and medication over her conscience. Now, watching her manager dragged away, she realized that silence had nearly cost her everything. She looked at Ava and saw not just a CEO, but a mirror, what courage might look like if you stopped being afraid. Leo Martinez, still in shock at his sudden promotion, blinked as if trying to wake from a dream. 1 minute, he had been fired for showing basic human decency. The next, he was an assistant manager. He clenched his jaw, vowing not to waste the chance Ava had just given him. Ava lowered the ice pack from her cheek and let her gaze sweep the store. We'll finish this later, she told the executives softly. But first, our customers deserve our attention. The words startled everyone. After everything, humiliation, insults, even a physical assault, Ava still chose to focus on the people standing around, the ones who had only come to buy phones and laptops. Anyone waiting for service, she said, raising her voice so all could hear, will be helped right now. By me. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The CEO herself? In a hoodie? Serving customers? The first to step forward was Lydia Wong, the businesswoman in cream who had nearly walked out forever. She lifted her head proudly and said, I'd like to buy that laptop, Ms. Johnson. From you. A smile ghosted across Ava's lips. Of course, she said. Together, they walked to the premium laptop bar. Every pair of eyes followed. As Ava processed the transaction herself, carefully explaining each option with the patience of a seasoned associate, whispers spread. Customers filmed. Employees watched, wide-eyed. Some felt shame, others awe. A few even cried. Because what they were witnessing was not just customer service, it was leadership, raw and unpolished, more powerful than any corporate speech. Natalie felt her heart twist. For months, she had wondered if she was doing the right thing by keeping her head down. Now she knew the answer. By the time Lydia left with her new laptop, she turned at the door and addressed the crowd. "This," she said, gesturing toward Ava, "is why I'll keep shopping here. Not because of products. Because of people." Phones caught her words, and within hours, those words would circle the internet like wildfire. 2 hours later, Ava stepped into the Novatech headquarters boardroom. The bruise on her cheek was already turning darker, and she hadn't covered it with makeup. She wanted it to be seen. She wanted it to be remembered. The executives looked stunned as she entered. Normally, Ava arrived at these meetings in tailored suits, her presence commanding, her voice measured. But today, she wore the same hoodie, faded jeans, and sneakers she had worn to the store. The room fell into uneasy silence. "Before we begin," Ava said, placing a printed photograph on the long glass table, "I need you all to see this." The photo showed Ethan's hand mid-swing, her head snapping sideways, and her face alight with the shock of impact. The image had already gone viral, but here, in this boardroom, it hit harder than any balance sheet. "This," Ava continued, "is why our mystery shopper program matters. This is why we can't afford to assume our values survive at the ground level just because we write them on the wall. Today, I walked into my own store and was profiled, humiliated, accused of theft, and physically assaulted. Not because I was Ava Johnson, CEO of Novatech, but because I looked like I didn't belong." Murmurs stirred around the table. One executive shifted uncomfortably, another scribbled notes furiously. "And here's the truth," Ava said, her voice steady. "If it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. It has happened to anyone. Our customers, our employees, our neighbors. We just haven't been watching." She paused, letting the silence stretch until it became a weight on every chest in the room. "From today forward," Ava declared, "Novatech will implement mandatory bias training, not as a punishment, but as a foundation. We'll restructure hiring to prioritize empathy as much as expertise. And every manager will be evaluated not only on sales, but on culture." The executives nodded, some reluctantly, others with genuine fire in their eyes. They knew this was more than policy. This was a line in the sand. ### the viral storm. By evening, the video had been shared over 2 million times. The hashtag #HoodieCEO trended worldwide. Clips of Ethan's slap, Ava's calm reveal, and her words, "I own this store," played on every major news network. Oprah Winfrey tweeted, "True leadership is dignity in the face of disrespect. Ava Johnson shows us what it means to stand tall." Business schools began drafting case studies overnight. Journalists called it the slap that changed retail. Customers flooded Novatech's website with messages of support. Sales surged instead of plummeting, because people wanted to shop somewhere that stood for something bigger than profit. Meanwhile, Ethan Parker's world collapsed. Fired on the spot, facing legal charges, abandoned by colleagues, his name became synonymous with arrogance and downfall. Where once he strutted like a king in a suit, now he was a pariah, reduced to angry statements online that nobody believed. Leo Martinez, on the other hand, became an overnight hero. Customers recognized him in the street, shaking his hand, thanking him for his courage. Ava announced the company would fund his entire business degree. He went from exhaustion and 3 jobs to a future wide open with possibility. Natalie Brooks, too, transformed. Instead of hiding, she stepped into leadership of the new training programs. She stood in front of hundreds of employees, admitting her silence, and used her story to inspire others never to repeat her mistake. And Ava Johnson? She remained the same, hoodie and all. She appeared on television interviews, not as a victim, but as a leader demanding that dignity and respect were not negotiable in business. The slap had been the end of one man's career. But it became the beginning of a movement. Because sometimes the most expensive lessons don't cost money. They cost arrogance, prejudice, and a single moment of silence broken by 2 words, "Your store." Ethan had always thought of himself as untouchable. In his mind, he wasn't just a store manager, he was the ruler of a kingdom. He wore $1,000 suits, demanded obedience from his staff, and savored the power that came with treating customers as if they needed his approval to buy. Now, in less than a day, he was a ruined man. By the time security escorted him out, clips of his tirade were already flooding social media. His dismissive comments about hoodies, his mocking laugh, his accusations, and finally, the slap, every second was immortalized in high definition. Within hours, his name was trending. Not the way he had once dreamed of, not for his excellence in leadership, but as a global symbol of prejudice and arrogance. News anchors dissected his behavior. Lawyers debated whether he should face criminal charges for workplace violence. Commentators called him the man who slapped his career away. At home, his phone buzzed endlessly, angry messages, death threats, and even old friends cutting ties. His wife packed her bags within the week, leaving a note that said only, "I can't do this anymore. Not after the world has seen who you are." Ethan went from walking marble floors to stacking boxes in a warehouse. From designer suits to a polyester vest. From ordering others around to being barked at by supervisors half his age. He told himself it wasn't permanent, but deep down, he knew he had destroyed his own future with one arrogant decision. While Ethan fell, Leo rose. The internet had fallen in love with him. The clip of him stepping forward, voice steady, saying, "She's just trying to shop like anyone else," was replayed millions of times. Memes popped up. "Be a Leo" became a slogan for standing up against injustice. But Leo wasn't thinking about fame. He was thinking about survival. For years, he had worked 3 jobs just to scrape by. Mornings at a coffee shop. Afternoons at school. Evenings at Novatech. Nights as a security guard. His days blurred into exhaustion. His dreams deferred by fatigue. Now, Ava had changed all of that with a single decision. She not only promoted him to assistant manager but also personally offered to fund his business degree. "You've shown me the kind of leader this company needs," she told him. "I don't want you to just stay here. I want you to build something bigger, with us." Leo cried that night, quietly in his small apartment, finally allowing himself the relief of knowing he didn't have to choose between rent and textbooks anymore. For the first time in his life, his dream of becoming a business leader didn't feel impossible. It felt inevitable. Natalie had lived in fear for too long. Ethan's shadow had loomed over her every shift. She had seen him humiliate customers before, and each time, she had swallowed her words. Each time, she had told herself, "I can't lose this job. My daughter depends on me." But silence had cost her self-respect. And when Ava confronted her, she thought the CEO would fire her on the spot. Instead, Ava offered her a second chance. "You'll keep your job," Ava said, "but you'll help me build something better. You'll train others, and you'll never be silent again when you see injustice." Natalie wept with gratitude. For the first time in years, she felt like she had power, not the power to command, but the power to protect. When the new company-wide bias training launched, Natalie stood in front of hundreds of employees. She told her story openly, how she had stayed quiet, how fear had chained her voice, and how she vowed never to repeat that mistake. Employees listened, and many of them saw themselves in her confession. Her vulnerability became her strength. As for Ava, she became more than just a CEO. She became a symbol. The video of her standing in a hoodie, touching the mark on her cheek, and saying, "I own this store," became iconic. Business schools studied her leadership. News programs praised her calm dignity. Customers flocked to Novatech, not just for products but to support a company that stood for respect. But Ava didn't let the praise distract her. She used the moment to rebuild Novatech from the ground up. She launched an undercover program where executives would work in stores disguised as ordinary customers, ensuring that what happened to her would never happen again. She invested in new training programs, hired leaders like Leo, and gave people like Natalie the tools to rise above fear. She didn't just change Novatech, she changed retail. Soon, other corporations followed suit. Walmart, Target, Best Buy, they all announced new customer service training inspired by Novatech's hoodie policy. Ava was invited to Harvard Business School to lecture on ethical leadership. Her case study became required reading in MBA programs worldwide. And through it all, Ava remained humble. She kept wearing her hoodie to stores, never announcing who she was, always testing, always watching. Social media turned the slap into a movement. The hashtag #HoodieCEO was joined by another, #RespectEveryone. People shared their own stories of being judged by appearance. Millions found solidarity in Ava's stand. Celebrities amplified the story. Ellen DeGeneres invited Ava onto her show. Oprah called her a true leader for our times. Talk shows debated whether more CEOs should go undercover to test their companies. For ordinary people, Ava's story became a beacon. It reminded them that respect wasn't about clothes, or money, or appearances. It was about humanity. 6 months after the slap, the Novatech flagship store was unrecognizable. Sales had soared by 47%. Employee turnover dropped to nearly zero. Customers praised the new culture, where everyone was treated with dignity, whether they wore Armani or a hoodie. Leo had not only thrived as assistant manager but had been accepted into a prestigious business program. Ava herself mentored him, preparing him for a future where he would one day lead his own company. Natalie had become head of the new bias training program, traveling from store to store, teaching others how silence can harm as much as cruelty. And Ethan Parker? His name had faded into the shadows, a cautionary tale whispered in business ethics classes, the manager who slapped his way out of history. But Ava Johnson's name lived on. Not just as a CEO, but as a reminder that true leadership is not about power. It's about dignity, about respect, about standing tall, even in a hoodie. Because sometimes, the smallest words can change the world. Your store.